The smell of gasoline and old leather lingered in the air as Kennedy's car rolled to a stop in front of a small, time-worn garage on the edge of town. The sign above the door was faded, the letters barely legible. Harris sought a repair. Kennedy sighed, frustrated. His engine had been stalling all morning, and now, in the middle of a busy week, the last thing he wanted was to deal with a breakdown. But little did he know, stepping into that shop would change far more than just his car up. It would leave him with a story he'd carry for the rest of his life. Inside, hunched over a workbench, was an elderly man with a shock of white hair and hands stained with grease. His back was curved from years of labor, his movements slow but steady. Kennedy almost asked if there was someone younger, someone faster to look at the car, but before he could speak, the old man lifted his head, smiled warmly, and said, "Let me take a look, son." There was something in his voice, steady, calm, reassuring that immediately softened Kennedy's impatience. The old mechanic introduced himself as Walter Harris. Every movement he made seemed deliberate, almost like he was conversing with the car rather than just fixing it. He listened to the engine with his ear close to the hood, tapped a few parts, then nodded knowingly. "She's tired," Walter said softly, "but she's not done yet. Give me a little time." Kennedy, skeptical at first, agreed to leave the car overnight. When he returned the next morning, the car was not only fixed but running smoother than it had in years. Kennedy was shocked. Walter had replaced worn-out belts, adjusted the timing, and even polished the chrome around the headlights. "She deserves to shine," Walter had said with a grin. Kennedy insisted on paying extra, but Walter refused. "Just enough to cover the parts. The rest a broken bar, well, let's just say helping someone keeps me feeling alive." Kennedy thanked him, shook his hand, and drove off, touched but not fully understanding the weight of Walter's words. A week later, something pulled Kennedy back toward that garage. He wasn't sure why. His car was fine, running better than ever, but the memory of Walter's kindness gnawed at him. Maybe it was guilt for not doing more. Maybe it was curiosity. When he pulled up, the garage door was half open. Inside, Kennedy saw Walter, not at the workbench, but sitting in a worn armchair, staring at an old framed photograph in his lap. Kennedy called out a greeting, but Walter didn't answer right away. He finally looked up, his eyes glassy, and motioned Kennedy inside. The photo was of a younger Walter in uniform, standing beside a military jeep with a group of smiling soldiers. Kennedy sat down quietly as Walter began to speak. He told Kennedy about his past, how he had served in the army decades ago, fixing vehicles under fire, keeping his brothers alive by making sure their trucks ran when it mattered most. He spoke of the men who never made it home, of promises unkept, and of the garage he had built afterward, trying to find peace in repairing machines because he couldn't repair the broken pieces of his heart. But the part that left Kennedy speechless was this: Walter's shop wasn't just a business. For years, he had secretly repaired cars for struggling single mothers, veterans who couldn't afford repairs, and teenagers trying to get to school. He never asked for more than a thank you. His only payment was the knowledge that he'd helped someone keep moving forward. Kennedy sat there, overwhelmed. He realized he had almost dismissed Walter as just an old mechanic, when in truth, he was a quiet hero who had been serving others his entire life. The two talked for hours that day. Kennedy learned that Walter's health was failing, though he never complained. His hands shook more than before, and some mornings he barely had the strength to open the garage. "But as long as I can still hold the wrench," Walter said with a small smile, "I'll keep fixing what I can." When Kennedy finally left, his heart was heavy yet inspired. He couldn't stop thinking about Walter's humility, his service, his silent sacrifices. And so, Kennedy made a decision. The next week, he rallied friends, neighbors, and even local businesses. Together, they renovated Walter's garage, supplied him with better tools, and set up a small fund to keep the shop running, even on the days Walter couldn't. More importantly, they created a community network to carry on Walter's mission, fixing cars for those in need, free of charge. The day they unveiled it all, Walter stood at the center of the crowd, trembling not from weakness but from the flood of emotions. Tears streaked his weathered cheeks as he whispered, I thought I was forgotten." Kennedy put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Men like you should never be forgotten." Walter's story spread across town, and before long, it inspired others far beyond the garage. People began to see that real strength isn't always loaded up, it's in the quiet sacrifices, the unnoticed kindness, the steady hands of someone who keeps others moving forward, even when no one is watching. And Kennedy never forgot that day. Every time he turned the key in his car and heard the engine roar to life, he remembered the elderly mechanic who reminded him and the world that true greatness lies not in what we have, but in what we give.